Right. Work session for the Annapolis City Council on Thursday, December 7th, 2023 will be called to order at 3 p.m. At this time, everyone willing and able, please join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. Tony, please present the only item on the agenda.
Yes, sir. The next item on the agenda is presentation ID 161-23, Land and Infrastructure Evaluation Study. Presenter is Eric Lashinsky.
Thank you for having us. Eric Lashinsky, Chief of Comprehensive Planning. I'm here with Casey Ortiz, Comprehensive Planner, who I work closely with. You're not hearing about the comp plan, so probably happy about that.
Yeah, it's much shorter.
Much shorter. But this is very integral to what we've been doing with the comprehensive plan. So I'm really excited to share this project. It's focusing on land economics. I do want to thank Alderman Schandelmeyer for his support of this project and sort of bringing the idea to our attention. It folded in nicely with the work we were doing on the comprehensive plan. And so I've been thrilled to work with this team this consultant team from Asheville, North Carolina. Let me pull up the presentation, actually. There we go, magically. Before I give the presentation, there's a brief video. So the consultant team we've been working with is called Urban 3. They're based in Asheville, North Carolina. As often happens with the budgets for projects, we did not have enough budget to get them up here multiple times to do presentations. They're going to be coming and giving a briefing at the end of this project, most likely in April. And they have been up here to do some reconnaissance work, kind of understand the context of Annapolis better. But for now, I'm giving the presentation. They did provide me with a video that's a little bit of an intro to what we're doing from their company founder. And I just want to share that to start. This should work. Let's see here. Oops. Let me see here. Bear with me for a sec. There we go.
Hi, my name is Joe Minicozy. I am the principal and founder of Urban 3, a land use economics firm based in Asheville, North Carolina. Our company is known for doing real estate economic analysis for cities, counties, regions, and places all around the country. I want to thank you for giving us the opportunity to explore your analytics, and this is a presentation for you all to have on what the data shows. So let me go ahead and share my screen. So when we look at data, we tend to want to know the cash flow of how you operate, but why does that matter for your community? Well, it matters because cities are incorporated. Cities, counties, state of Florida, our country. If you look up the word incorporate, it says to constitute a company, a city, other organization as a legal corporation. So it's a cash flow. It's like a really big real estate development project. And essentially the city is a finite boundary of land. More true in the county. Palm Beach County can't annex the next county over. But your land is essentially a fixed product. And the land production of how you operate is an economic cash flow. So we need to understand the efficiency of how do you look at one crop, a building, like let's say a house against a strip mall. What is the productivity? Two totally different animals because of how they use real estate, but there is a common denominator. So let's think of it a different way. When we talk about cars, we don't look at the cars and, if I were to say, what's the miles per tank of each of the cars, you'd sort of laugh at me and say, that's Joe, that's kind of silly. We don't gauge cars on a miles per tank because all tanks are different sizes. So we wouldn't talk about the truck at 650 miles per tank. Instead, we say miles per gallon. And when we do, the numbers shift and we should all be driving the BMW Isetta. So the highest producer here is the 1955 technology. Sorry to the Prius owners, but that's true. This is the data. So we look at real estate the same way from a productivity standpoint. The other thing that we do is focus on how do we envision information. So if I can go to my doctor and get a CAT scan of my brain and show you the brainstem activity in blue versus your creative thought process in green, can we do an economic MRI of your place? So back to my county, just to give you an example, this is the way that we typically talk about real estate, which is a total value. So if you look in the upper left over here, you see non-taxable is at 0, low value is in green, high value is in purple. This big purple splotch right here, that's the Biltmore estate. That's America's largest house. That one property is worth $100 million, which is pretty cool. But it's a 180,000 square foot house sitting on 8,000 acres of land. So this is like having the biggest gas tank. So rather than total value, here's value per acre. So you see the map shift. And let's just not stop there. Let's show it to you in 3D. So here you can see the potency of my community. So when I talk to folks out in the county, I show them this model and ask them, can you guess where downtown is? And everybody says the big purple mountain. So there it is. That's our downtown in production. Also, you can see the different land use patterns in the community. You can see our cousin Black Mountain over here. This is a little village of 13,000 people, about 10 miles outside of Asheville. And you can see its little downtown popping up as well. So the way that we use real estate can be seen in that model. The potency that you get out of that walkable downtown, it shows up. Conversely, you can see the sprawl on the south side of the city isn't all that productive.
Okay, so that's the presentation. That's just the intro. We have some slides to go into what the team has been doing so far. We already have a question.
Yeah, how is this analysis going to go when everybody's in EVs?
Let me, if you don't mind, let me shelve that question until the end, because I think I'll get into the process. But let me go to full screen here and yeah. Well, I think even though it was a little hard to hear at first, Joe gave a good overview of their process, why we're doing this. I mean, I think I would expand on it by saying that City Council makes significant decisions about how do we allocate resources in the city. Never seems like we have enough money to pay for the things that residents want. We obviously have a lot of real estate in the city that is not taxable, probably more than a typical size city like Annapolis. I can say from experience working on a lot of our quality of life project parks and trails, and most of those are paid by external funding. I mean, we put money towards them from the general fund, but it's often matching funds. So it's challenging for us to raise the level of service in the city that residents are asking for. What this analysis is doing is showing us, well, we have a finite amount of land. How can we be more proactive in using it to pay for the things that we want to do in the city? And not all development is equal. And so we're going to show you a bit of the analysis so far. We're just kind of in the beginnings of this project. So the other thing I just want to state, major decisions have been made in the past that were based on the return on investment. You think about Inner West Street or the Park Place project. The city puts up public funds to catalyze private investment. This analysis will show us that kind of return. And so I think it's valuable as we plan for the future and make decisions in the future to understand how those things have played out. This is my qualifier. It's obviously not going to, this is an economic study. It's not going to look at everything that goes into value. There's certainly a lot of intangibles and things that are more qualitative, but from a pure economic analysis, I think there's a lot that we can that use to make more informed decisions here. So as I mentioned, we're working with a team that's based in Asheville, and project is here in Annapolis. This is their economic MRI for Annapolis. This is really the beginning. So this is a map of Annapolis based on parcels, land in the city, that shows their tax assessed value. This is the data we get from the state. I think it's based on 2022 data, so maybe not completely up to date, but pretty close. The purple is the highest assessed value, and the gray is tax exempt or no value, and the dark green is lower value properties, just purely based on total amount. And then you shift to looking at taxable value per acre, it's completely different. You see the highest value parcels are in the downtown area and in the Eastport area, and there's a portion in Parole, which is the Annapolis Towns, some other, pockets of high value real estate in other parts of the city, but more scattered. And so this is taxable value per acre, VPA. It's the metric that we're using. Yes, yeah.
Thank you. Can you explain how that happened again?
Yeah, so basically, the previous slide is just purely the total taxable assessed value. So like looking at the Nautilus Point development in Eastport, for example, formerly Watergate Apartments. So they pay a lot, or not. This isn't revenue. This isn't how much they pay. This is their assessed value, how much the tax is based on. But
House in there?
what? Oh, right. But then if you look at it by acreage, the amount that Nautilus Point is, their assessment is not as high as a lot of other things because it's a large area. That assessed value is over a much larger area than some of the smaller downtown parcels or other parcels in Eastport. So it basically gives you a sense of the intensity of assessed value on the land. And then if you extrude those parcels, you get a graphic that looks like this. This is not the future Annapolis downtown skyscrapers. No, this is just purely looking at economic value pulled up from the ground. So the spire in the middle, that's Park Place, that goes off the screen.
It's my penthouse condo.
Yeah. And then you have downtown Annapolis, sort of in the middle. This is the Parole area, the Annapolis Towns development on the left here. And you can kind of see the story here. If you look at it for the county, you can see how Annapolis fits in. I mean, we often talk about Annapolis being an economic engine for the county, job center, et cetera. Well, this makes that case pretty clearly. You can see the Parole area off to the left here, and I think up here, this purple is probably Glen Burnie area. But you can see, majority of the county is, well, there are some pockets of high value per acre. It doesn't compare to what you find in Annapolis. And then they use this metric called productivity ratio. And this is basically looking at, based on the amount of area that we're talking about, how much value over the area. So Annapolis, if you look at the pie chart on the left, we're 1.7% of the county's land area, but our value is 7.7%. So you're dividing 1.7 into 7.7 to get this 1 to 4.5. And so it's a good productivity ratio based on how small of a city we are over the entire area of the county. It could be higher, but this is where it gets a little more interesting. If you look at the downtown to the entire city, the downtown is about the same. It's a small area within the larger city of Annapolis. It's a 4.9 productivity ratio for the size of the area that it represents. And then if you look at the downtown in comparison to the county, downtown Annapolis is 0.1% of the total county land area, but provides 1% of the value to the county. So that's a 22, it's a productivity ratio of 1 to 22, So that's where it gets really high. It just goes to say, the downtown is a thriving economic place for the city and region. I mentioned this earlier, the city has 20% of our land area is not taxable, and that's not even including the Navy's properties. which are technically outside the city. So it's something that we've learned to deal with. So this is getting into the analysis that the team has done so far of specific properties. This is kind of funny. They use Walmart as a baseline in a lot of places. They work all over the country because people can relate to that as sort of, well, it's, a lot of people appreciate Walmarts, but they tend to be, from an economic perspective, not a huge winner for a place, just purely based on the amount of space that they need and their taxable assessed value. But these are the closest. We don't have a Walmart in Annapolis, so these are the closest ones somewhere in Anne Arundel County. And their analysis found that their assessed value per acre is $1.1 million per acre, both of them approximately. So one is a little higher, one's a little lower. They average out. Yeah.
Assessed value means taxable
Yeah.
value? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is what they were actually assessed for.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
When we look at residential, we'll start with single-family homes. We know there's a wide variety of them in the city. It's hard to talk about them in one way. They come in at about $1.8 million per acre in terms of value, their assessed value. You can look at some specific examples. We wanted to pick examples that were sort of, divergent, diverse. Heritage community off of Forest Drive, $1.2 million per acre. Hunt Meadow, near Annapolis Middle, $1.3 million per acre. And then Clay Street, $2 million per acre. And I'll tell you why, if some people might be surprised to see that. You look at just an incremental change in the density of the area. You go from a single-family detached house to essentially a townhouse or a row house. That has a dramatic change on the value. And I should have said this at the beginning. We're only looking at assessed value right now. Part of the analysis after today is going to get into the costs of servicing different development types. So infrastructure, roadways, utilities, water, sewer, et cetera. The team has just about gathered all the information that they need to do that analysis. And so that will be the next step. Right now, we're just looking at assessed value. This is some more examples. Bowman Court, I think, is Annapolis Gardens off Admiral Drive. Eastport, this is on Bay Ridge Avenue, is Triplex. Bell West, you all know on Chinkapin and West Street, and then downtown. I don't know the exact address, but the trend is that things definitely get higher in the downtown area as you get closer to downtown. So they average multifamily dwellings in the city average about 2.5 million per acre. And then if you look at some more examples, you have a duplex. I think this is off of Edgewood Road, 3.5 million per acre. Annapolis Towns, I mentioned, is high up there, 17 million per acre. Downtown duplex, 54 million per acre. And so, while the duplex is not exactly a townhouse, we're kind of looking at townhouse examples or kind of attached housing. And so you can see that's sort of in terms of kind of bang for the buck, the townhouse or the duplex is really the value. And then again, the highest is the Park Place development, and it's
Yeah, right there, that's. Let me know when I have a bedroom.
But I do want to, I want to, this is looking at the full development of the Park Place. So it's a mixed use development. It has condos, it has office, has retail, has a hotel. So that's, says something about the combination of different assets in that one development. And this is the only tax increment finance project, I think, in the city. I don't know how that was structured back in the day, but my understanding is that there was some kind of a tax increment financing for this. So that's important. I mean, the city made a commitment, and we're getting a return from that that's pretty substantial. But this is the summary that we just looked at. On the commercial side, these are, the sort of bigger commercial centers. Most of them, the one on the bottom has been renovated recently along Solomon's Island Road, but the others are a bit old. No, Safeway is not that old. The Giant Food and Bay Ridge is older. But they're similar to a Walmart in terms of the typology, large surface parking, single story, et cetera. So about the same assessed value. You look at smaller scale retail, say on Annapolis Street, this is what we're looking at. Kind of ranging from 2.2 million per acre to 6.5 million per acre at the coffee shop, Bean Rush. The 2.7 million, the 106 Annapolis, that's a brand new building. It's got apartments on the second floor. It may be higher than that because this is based on the 2022 value. So maybe today it's a higher assessed value, most likely.
Eric?
Yeah.
That one's kind of skewed, like what, because that's comparable scale and density, in West Annapolis. What makes Bean Rush higher? Is it the mixed use or versus?
I think it wouldn't have been reassessed.
Or is that what
Right.
it is? Yeah.
I think 106 is going to be much higher in the new assessed value. Yeah,
Okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense.
I think
All
so.
those $80 fajitas.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I mean, I think the one at the end of Annapolis Street is, an older building. It's,
Makes you want to have a coffee
but-
shop.
and then downtown, just in a different category, I would say, in terms of the value. These are just a few of the examples, Main Street and Randall Street and Dock Street. So just to close, the next step in this is to actually look at larger development patterns. We can look at corridors in the city. We can look at neighborhoods, different development types, more than just a single building, but we can kind of look at patterns of development to understand what kind of value they yield. And then we're going to be looking at the costs of servicing those properties and kind of looking at that comparison. But this is just a summary of some of the places that you've seen already. I guess the Enclave is a new one that we didn't talk about, but that's former brownfield site, as I understand it, on Spa Road, now townhouses. And then the Downtown Hotel, Dean Street condos, relatively small footprint residential downtown, and then a few other mixed use along West Street where the Curate Coffee Shop is located, and the Tecumseh condos in Eastport. So I'm happy to answer questions at this point. That's the extent of the presentation. So I meant it when I said it was going to be brief, but I look forward to coming back. It's probably going to be in April when we have kind of more of the analysis and how we could use the analysis, really.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you for the presentation. I think this is a huge step in the right direction of actually putting analytic information to the problem rather than specter and fear and so forth. But I do want to, first of all, this is, if I understand it so far, the property tax return per acre in various locations throughout the city.
Yeah, technically, it's not the return. You could maybe say that the tax is going to be proportionate to the assessed value, but yeah, we didn't actually look at the exact revenue coming in, but just the value that revenue is based on.
So the message that I take, they say in real estate, it's location, 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 but also from this, it's density, density, density. The more dense properties are the ones that are going to have the higher yield. And that's fine. I'm not even sure I would call it economic analysis. I would call it financial analysis. But then you get to all of the other kinds of returns, such as community character, quality of life. And those, I would argue, counterbalance some of the economic return. And it's actually something that I think is quite germane to our affordable housing dialogue that's going on. I'm watching with some amusement the county struggling with their moderately priced dwelling unit legislation, which we did, 15 years ago. It was interesting to see how that finally turned out, that they really are focusing it on residents, take care of the residents who live here first, and then people who work. And I forget what the third category was, but in any event, I think that some of the things that we really need to take into consideration are the after effects of increased density, because that is where I believe we start to get into quality of life. The other thing that, and I think Alderwoman Finlayson and I discussed this probably again 15 years ago when we were looking at our workforce housing legislation, and there seems to be an assumption that everybody wants to live as close as possible to the heart of the city, and that helps determine our target for the number of units we want to make available. But it is clearly not the case that everybody wants to live near the heart of the city for a number of reasons. One, some people don't like density. Two, some people want to be closer to their other job, as we found with fire. Some people don't want to live near the police, the people that they're servicing. And a big one, and I'm going to get a reaction over here, is some people don't want to live where there's not good quality or perceived good quality schools. So I'm wondering, will this analysis allow us to bring into play all of those kinds of factors, so that I do admit that the purple spikes do remind me of Arlington and Northern Virginia and Bethesda. I certainly don't want to go there with Annapolis, but will we be able to get into things outside of financial or economic analysis and get into, in my view, the kinds of things that we get hit with from our constituents, whether correct or not? And I agree, we can't react to the specter, and that's why I really like this analysis. This is saying, no, here's the quantitative, not qualitative analysis. We can get into the qualitative. Anyway, a lot of points there, but
I think we are going to get into it. Quality of life is a big, broad term, and it can be somewhat subjective, but I think the way that we're going to tackle it, it's access to services and conveniences, it's access to parks. I think when we look at some of the development patterns and we compare neighborhoods or what value is different, we'll be able to look at assets that are in the community that might be adding to that assessed value. Or so certainly, that has to be part of the equation. This is not going to tell us, there is a decision-making component that is not going to go away in terms of, it might tell us the value that certain development types would yield, but we're going to still have to make a determination on what's best for the city and what is appropriate for Annapolis. We're not, I'm looking at my screen here and I see the Tecumseh condos at $30 million per acre. It doesn't mean that the waterfront is going to be covered in condos, right? We've certainly made a consensus determination that that's not what the city, it's not what's going to happen on our waterfront.
It's the missing middle.
Yeah, right. But so, I think it's still going to be a very site-specific decision-making, but I think it'll give us, what I'm particularly interested in is just like incremental changes could have an impact, so that's what I hope might come out of this, but no, I mean, you're absolutely right that living next to a park, living next to green space of some kind adds a lot of value. It's not like we wouldn't just say, oh, we're going to develop Truxton Park because we could yield all this. That has a value to it. That,
You actually have that in the comp plan.
yeah, right. So,
Alderman Tierney?
Yes. That luxury condo, Park Place, that evaluation, I would think that the parking underneath factors into that. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
probably, yeah.
It's a nice
There's a
place,
lot.
but,
There's a lot of parking.
Okay, the second thing is a question, just to simplify this, a real life example, I might be getting ahead of myself here, but on how you could use this and apply it to a question. For example, you're familiar with the site on West Street and Monticello. It's an abandoned gas station. It's been there and it basically looks like it should be condemned, okay? So you've got that lot. I don't know what else you got, but you got the lot and you got the location. Okay, so you're gonna factor in the location and the value of the land, right? But then you're also gonna factor in what is the best application? You know, should it be a restaurant? Should it be, multi housing, mixed use? So how do you do that? how can you use this to evaluate a situation like that? I would think it would be a great tool to have. I just don't know how you go about it. Is it the land, or is it the use, or is it looking at both in concert with each other to optimize? I mean, the whole thing about this is to optimize the limited land that we have as far as, I guess I would say, revenue, right? In return on revenue. So how would you do that? Would that be a case where this could be utilized?
Yeah, I think so. I don't, with a site like that, I think it's maybe a little more straightforward just because there's a development pattern that it's, surrounded by or adjacent to, and just simply continuing some of that, I think based on this analysis so far, would be a good use of that site. But I think you do have to factor in community input still. It's, that's definitely, it's not, we're not going to be making decisions purely based on the economic return. But, if there's any kind of public component to the site, or it just depends on, it's really hard to say. I think with each site, you do want to do a context analysis to understand, but I think, so actually where I think this might end up having more impact is in understanding our zoning code and what that could be doing differently. Ultimately, it's
Form-based zoning.
yeah, these building types are kind of identify with what they end up, what kind of benefit they have to the city. And I think we can ultimately look at what's appropriate for the city and what isn't. So I think on a broad view, I think it's going to help us think about, development patterns in the city, but like a site specific, like just one property, I think it's maybe not going to be as helpful just for like an individual site,
So what you get from this is that the land right now is not being optimized, and
that's the
gist.
We can definitely get that from it, but getting into the nitty gritty of how that site should be better used. I think, anything really.
Okay.
But,
Got it.
yeah.
Thanks.
Thank you. Alderman Savage and Brooks, do you need to talk to? And then Alderman Pindell Charles. Yeah.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the analysis. It is very interesting. And I would like to hear your thoughts more on how you think we can use it. I think, especially when, for my work, comparing the value of the Giant compared to some of the nearby residential properties, and particularly mixed use, I'll have to fill you in on at some point, another time, my conversation with the developer who wants to put a Taco Bell over there. And, I think there are many more things we do with the property that have value to the community. So, so I do think there's a use, but I also think, as you've even said yourself, I think it needs to be balanced, right? Because tax revenue is not necessarily always a great way to measure things by alone, right? Because I think if we do that, it can kind of lead to sprawl and gentrification, because we're always just trying to keep growing. The most expensive housing brings in the most tax revenue, as we saw. Be adding more density, because all of that increases tax base. But I think there are but to do that, I don't think we can do that at the expense of our other more intrinsic values, our services, right? And that's where I think I'd like to see, some more information. I think this is only part of the study. Like like you mentioned, they're going to look into the cost aspect of it more. So I think that'll help balance it out. But I'm also wondering, because I think when you brought up you showed up some of the examples, of value, and like the open space has obviously zero tax revenue value. So that inherently would be underappreciated in this kind of analysis. Another example you showed was Tecumseh, which, we don't want more Tecumsehs because those ended up blocking the view of the water and dominating the waterfront, because that is the most wealthiest, valuable land, right? So if it's just a free market, let's seek out tax revenue, we're gonna end up with an overdeveloped waterfront. So in that sense, I'm saying it because I think this kind of analysis may undervalue, for example, the maritime districts. And then you've got City Dock Park even, which I'm sure is probably undervalued. So I think a good way to kind of have this be one of many factors would be, another example would be like roadways, right? I think a road for cars is probably going to have less value. I'm not talking about tax value, but just value to the community, as opposed to something for pedestrians or cyclists, which is more equitable, more volume, more energy uses, right? That has more of a value. So is there a way to get a study that places a value on our infrastructure like that, or our amenities? Because I think that paired with this would be really interesting.
They are going to provide analysis of roadways based on what's called functional classification, essentially like major arterials versus neighborhood streets. So we'll get an understanding of, housing that's along Forest Drive versus housing that's along, a side street to Forest Drive, that there is a difference in how much cost it is to get to those places, or, so that is going to be part of this analysis. But we did a separate for the park space. And so, I'm sorry, I want to finish saying that. So the character of the street does matter, but the best that we can do in this circumstance is look at, a smaller street. We're not going to know exactly if it has great sidewalks or not, but it's just, different character of streetscape. So that will be part of the analysis. But I'm going to take a note. They might have some based on other work they've done in other places, how you could value a street that has all the bells and whistles versus one that doesn't,
Yeah, I guess my point is I just feel like it needs to be balanced with other analyses, because, yes, I think it's important to have some attention to this, because we do want to make sure we're sustainable financially. And if we were to build more housing that's just has little value, we're going to be digging ourselves a hole for ourselves ultimately financially, right? But I think it needs to be balanced with the value of the infrastructure and some of the maritime zoning, maritime districts. How do we place a value on that? Societal value, or not? I mean, I don't know what to call it, but it's value to us as a maritime city, right? I don't know how you quantify that.
Alderman Charles?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. About 4 points or comments. Number one, and I'm sorry I was a little late today. I'm looking at the breakdown of your taxable value, and to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, the 100,001 to 1 million, that's a huge, widespread value. Shouldn't it be broken down further? Because it may not be a great picture of what we really want to see. The first one is 0, then it's 100,000, then it's 100, tell me if I'm wrong, 100,001 to 1 million.
No, that's a good observation. We could ask them to break it into like 100,000 to 500,000, 500 to a million. They could probably do
Or
that.
even 250.
Yeah,
I mean, I think in
250.
Annapolis, we have a wide range.
Yeah, it looks
of
like some of
values.
these use the 250.
Now, once you get to the 4 to 5, 6,
Yeah.
7 million, I think I don't think you need to break that down.
Yeah.
But I think anything under probably 1 million needs to be broken down by 250, 500, and 750. I think that's a better picture of what we like to see here in Annapolis. That's just my thought. The other thing I want to mention, and I'm looking at the different types of homes and residences you have, and you have the rentals and the home ownership together. Is that a fair or even kind of per acre, when you do it per acre? Is that kind of, I won't say disingenuous, but when you look at Bell Annapolis or Town Courts versus some other heritage. I mean, of course, the valuations are going to be different, but you're talking about rental market rate or subsidized Bowman Court versus home ownership.
Yeah, as we've been trying to think about the analysis, we haven't really done analysis yet. These are just kind of picking out certain sites. As we've been thinking about the analysis, we have been talking about we could make an effort to compare apples to apples. I think we do want to understand content, location. It does matter, and I think that you could make assumptions about like Bell West, where because it does have the retail at the ground
Right.
floor and certain types of apartments, perhaps. But yeah, we'll probably look at comparing similar types of development.
Okay, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
Number 3, we all talk about the quality of life, and we do agree it is all subjective. But one of the examples you gave is assets in the community. And in my estimation, assets in the community are subjective as well. So what may be an asset in Ward 3 may not be in another ward. So I think assets are subjective as well. I think it's, and I'm not going to belabor it, but anyway, small area plans kind of lend itself to what are assets in a certain community, what's the quality of life in a certain community. So that's just my 2 cents worth. And the last thing is, and I've heard this twice since I've sat here, benefits to the city. And I don't want to misspeak, but is that versus the detriment of the residents? Okay,
No.
I don't want that to be misunderstood. If it's a benefit to the city, does that mean it's a detriment to the residents?
We would definitely be looking at things that benefit the residents. And I mean, I kind of I use that term loosely when I say benefits to the city. I mean, it's like balancing our budget, but it's also providing all the amenities that residents want to see. So, but yeah, I think if we're doing things right, the things that benefit the city are also benefiting the residents.
Not all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Alderman Shanamar, then Alderman Annette.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mrs. Shinsky, I appreciate the deep dive on this report. Some of the things that I find really interesting is that the value per acre doesn't necessarily follow the lines of what we would see as like neighborhood wealth. Clay Street, for example, being $2 million per acre, and other more wealthy communities like Hunt Meadow are only at 1.2. I think that's very worthwhile to see. Alderman Savage, get to one of your questions. One of the things with this study that they're going to get into is expenditure data to cover our infrastructure for things like roadways, sidewalks, cycle paths. So that'll kind of show that, and we'll get into things like how much does each piece of infrastructure cost and based on neighborhood revenue. But one of the things that I do want to point out, and I'm seeing this already getting our bristles up of why we can't change, we're facing a structural deficit, and our options are either legalize these more financially productive types of building, or raise taxes, or cut services. Now, raising taxes and cutting services, we all know, has a very negative impact on quality of life for our residents. We all know people who need the services that we offer, whether it's transit, whether it's rental assistance, or even just the basic things like maintaining our infrastructure, maintaining police presence, or maintaining fire. We know that raising taxes can take a big cut out of our budget. So if we have a way forward for financial resiliency that's just letting some gradual change occur, we can do a lot for our city finances. And a lot of this info is showing. Thank you.
Alderman Arnett? Yes. First of all, Alderwoman Pendle Charles, I really liked your 4 questions. I think they were right on target. So I'm going to listen to this and try to write them down. One of the things that I've been doing is looking at other communities that are further ahead than we are in this, and I've been particularly following Minneapolis, Minnesota. And I will be sending soon to you some articles. I also promised it to Mr. Littman, and I haven't gotten around to doing it. And it's very interesting. It's written by a person who was a developer and is now a professor at one of the local universities. And he's looking at the things that make cities expensive cities versus not expensive cities. And unfortunately for me, he didn't discuss Chicago, which I think is somewhat of an anomalous situation. But he found 2 things that make cities expensive. One is a good supply of well-paying jobs, and the other is amenities. It speaks to something that Alderman Savage raised, and I think you too, Alderwoman Pendle Charles, and you, Mr. Lashinsky, and particularly I've noticed it a lot throughout the comprehensive plan. But one of the things that is vexing or perplexing me, and I'll be talking about this a little bit tomorrow morning, is I don't know that there's a lot of flexibility. If you have a area that is a high-value area because of the quality of the jobs and also the amenities, I don't know what kind of legislative policies or even economic policies you can put in place that would really be able to overcome those kinds of natural forces. And so it's one of the things I'm going to be looking at. You can have a seat here. You got in late, Mr.
Nice, I like this.
So I raise all of these points because I think this, oh, you naysayers, you NIMBYs. This is a very complex issue that the reality is it's a complex issue that we all live in. And we in particular have to be responsive to because our constituents brings these issues to us. So I think that empirical analysis like this, albeit only from one vector, and I do want to see those automobile miles per acre or whatever, and I do think 2 things are going to change the situation naturally. One is going to electronic vehicles, There you go. The other is demographics. Having worked in the Office of the Actuary, I am very aware of demographics. One of the demographics that is affecting us right now are the demographics of some of the people in the room, which are the baby boomers. I'm pre-baby boomer, but baby boomers. Then there's the baby bust, and then there's the cohorts that follow. But they have a big impact on what are the demands for housing and what is the demand for the kind of housing. So this is a very complex issue, and I will be interested in the discussion. Every time I hear about we need housing, we need affordable housing, usually the third reason is we need to reduce people's commuter miles because they're burning fossil fuels. If we go to EVs, and we may be putting those fossil fuels in the air in West Virginia, but that takes that argument out of the picture a little bit. So I'm not sure I accept that as a forever argument. But we also do need to be looking at the demographics because that is something that is fairly immutable and will change over time. So those were not questions, those were comments. But anyway, Mr. Mayor, would you like to?
I mean, I think that if I could just, I know it wasn't a question, but I agree that how we get around will have a dramatic impact on the city and quality of life, and I think in value. We're obviously talking a lot about how other ways of getting around could be done sooner than later here, particularly transit, and so
Bicycles?
Yeah, I mean, you're right that the vehicle emissions is a big issue, but it's also congestion. I mean, people are really eyeing that as a problem, and one of the only ways we can combat that is by providing safe alternatives to getting around. That's today we're kind of a one-dimensional city in terms of how you get around. So, yeah, that will definitely impact things as we move forward.
Alderman Padilla Charles.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just want to bring up one part about the commuter and the congestion. And when I finished law school and I got a job here, it didn't go well at all. And I found myself only being able to find something comparable and suitable was in Baltimore City. I had to go there. And I don't think my story is unusual oftentimes for various reasons. We're not going to get into it. People have to work outside of the city in order to feed their families. And so I think we need to look at sometimes the historical and cultural nature of our city and what it looks like and what it is, because sometimes people are forced into going places that they don't mind once they get there, but commuting an hour and a half every day sometimes is necessary. So while things may look great on paper and in theory, sometimes we got to dive deeper and look at it even more realistically. So.
Alderman Pendle Charles, if it happened today, you'd probably be able to work from home 3 days a week too.
That's the.
I would say we have all the pieces for a 15-minute city. I mean, a very small, compact area, but we need the connectivity still. I'm interested because I love this model and I love the model that you showed of us in the county. Is there any revenue piece to this? Because we all see ourselves as a revenue center, but we don't really have the numbers to back it up. It's a theory, right? But when you look at that chart, it clearly shows value. Do they dig into that side of it at all or not?
No, I don't think we're going to get into the exact revenues. I could double check that, but I mean, I think we probably could do that fairly easily. So Let me check into that, but.
Mr. Mayor, if I may answer that, because the state and the county have that. And we actually do in some work that Joe Budge did years ago. The spending affordability model that the county uses has those revenue kinds of estimates as well as expenditure estimates. I've been long urging that this city adopt that spending affordability model. Our revenue distribution is slightly different than the county and to the state too, which look more like each other than us. But it does point out the heavy dependence on property taxes. I think that Mr. Schandelmeyer raised some good points about what are our options, and I think raising taxes in a way other than cents per hundred, but in the way that the county executive talks about, which is a progressive property tax, where you have the people who can bear more of the cost, bearing more of the cost instead of paying the same amount, are things that we can consider. And there is no one solution. I think inevitably we are going to have to raise taxes. And we may not cut services, but we may change who's providing the services from the city to the county. And I'm thinking the transit system, with all the things the county's doing now that make them look really appealing to me as a regional transit. But it is true that our time of reckoning, as I used to say when I was on the Finance Committee, and I'm glad Alderman Schandelmeyer raised structural deficit, our time of reckoning is going to come sometime. We can't continue to skate with no tax increases other than those that come from property value increases. So there will have to be some way to address that.
Just as long as it doesn't come in the next 2 years. Okay, anybody else? I think we don't work sessions, is it? Do we, I mean, if you guys are okay with it, I'm okay with it. Yep, you want to come to the podium then?
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to speak. I would just caution, as you're looking at this, you're looking at revenue, and from a fiscal perspective, revenue is only one piece of the puzzle. I did think I caught you saying you were going to look at expenses as well. I don't presume to know what the result of that would be, but I think overlaying revenue less expenses to give you a net is really the piece that you want to look at. And looking at revenue by itself is not particularly meaningful. If anyone running a business knows you could sell something all day long, but if you're not making a profit of it, the revenue is really irrelevant. And so it's that next net result that I think is more important. Separately, certainly operating and with a view of what is revenue generating throughout the city is an important perspective, but I would certainly think it's not the only perspective. And you want a diversity of areas. Certainly paving over Quiet Waters Park, for instance, and putting the densest housing possible is not, I think, a net benefit to the community. I realize Quiet Waters Park is not part of the city. That's why I use it as a reference.
That's not going to be your platform, I hope.
So, I just think when you talk about what you want to do with properties, just putting it in context of the bigger picture would be productive. Thank you for your opportunity.
Thank you. I'm just interested because we, from the revenue side, we obviously are a wealthy community with high incomes for the wealthy people here, and we don't really have that broken out. So I don't know if Alderman Budge dug that deep. I haven't seen that information. If there's been a report, 8 years ago, I'd like to look at it because
it actually wasn't a report. It was work we were doing where we were matching both revenues and expenses by parcel. And it's two very different pictures. Revenues are coming from pretty much 3 major wards, but expenditures are much more smoothly spread across the city. So there's a cross subsidy, which again, as a Democrat, I don't mind. I believe in redistribution of wealth, but it will show across subsidy. I tried to develop that more fully and work with Ross Deerdorf, and I just ran out of time and energy to do it. But the data are there. They're 2015 data, but it could be updated, and it really could be merged with the spending affordability, and I think is something we need to talk to planning and zoning about, because it's a good analytical tool, even if we're not going to necessarily use it as a policy tool. I don't think you're aware of all that work, Eric, but I could show it to you. It's actually
that
pretty exciting.
Be valuable to see that.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, appreciate that
Yeah.
first steps in that. Thank you so much.
Welcome.
Sure, there's
Thank
lots
you.
more ahead, and this is the money the council approved for this study, so we're looking forward to those results.
Yeah.
Thank you again, guys. Thank you.
Sure. You're
We
welcome.
should thank Alderman Shondelmeyer for bringing it to our attention.
Thanks, Brooks. Oh, sorry, Alderman Tierney.
No, I just thanks Brooks.
Thanks, Brooks.
Thank you.
Don't look so despondent.
Tell us.
You're on a big screen. I'm going to play poker with Brooks. Okay, is there anything else for good order? Okay, all right. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.